Hey everyone, I'm Joe Mayers, and this is the Think Forever Storytelling Podcast. This episode was a special one for me to be a part of. It's poignant and emotional. In fact, I'm doing this intro just after finishing the story performance, and I had to pause the recording a couple times just to wipe the tears out of my eyes. So buckle up, because this one is all about righteous anger and grace, and what it looks like to show love to your enemies and overcome evil with good. From author Alyssa Poblete, this is Justice and Mercy, Part 1. Blood pooled along the shoreline, thick and stagnant. Blood hung in the air, its suffocating metallic scent clinging to the tongue. Blood was the topic of every conversation. Blood and the lack of water. For 6 days, there had been no sign of relief. Jariah combed his hand through his thick, damp hair, gathering it up at the base of his neck to pull it from sticking to his skin. Jariah had to keep reminding himself the blood wasn't really the problem. It was a sign of hope. He grew up hearing the stories. His father rehearsed the promises of God from as early as he could remember. This was the beginning of God's covenant promise to bring his people to a promised land. It was also a warning from Adonai, a command to the Pharaoh to release the Israelites after generations of slavery. Pharaoh's refusal to obey God's commands led to consequences. Unfortunately, consequences that also affected Jariah and his family. Jariah's feet slipped in the dust. The muscles in his legs coiled and screamed from the long day's work. His lips, stretched over his teeth, cracked and raw as he winced in pain. His legs buckled easier with each passing day. Jariah grew up in this life, enslaved to the Egyptian taskmasters, but as the days carried on, the conditions kept getting harsher. His world had become so small. Wake, work, sleep, repeat. Sleep didn't even feel like an appropriate word for the restless few hours he had to prepare for the next day's work. The taskmasters were slowly breaking him, tearing him into a million tiny pieces and putting him back together again, new and different. He was becoming harder, unfeeling, inhuman. He could feel it. The only thing keeping him going was his family. After his father had passed when Jariah was 12, as the eldest son, his family depended on him. Atalia, Keturah, and their mother, Lydia, couldn't make it on their own. Jariah stumbled through the front door and found his sister, Atalia, unloading her things onto the floor, clearly having just arrived home moments before him. Almost sundown. She'd been gone all day. Her hair hung in wild, unkempt tangles, fraying at the edges. Her eyes were hollow and sunken in with exhaustion. Her dark cheeks were stained almost black with dirt. It was smeared across her forehead, caked into her toes, covering her dress. Her fingertips seemed permanently stained dark. The dirt pressed so deep into the grooves of each fingertip no washing could erase it. "Any luck?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Atalia shook her head as she lowered her empty jugs to the floor. "I dug all day. I couldn't find anything. Some Egyptians found a water source along the bank of the river, but they refused to share even a few drops." His jaw tightened. Of course they did. "They're desperate too." She hesitated, glancing at him. Jariah scoffed. Atalia always had a way of seeing the best in others, even the most vile of humans. It made Jariah all the more watchful and protective of her. Atalia swept a few stray hairs out of her face. "Maybe this will be enough for Pharaoh to let us go." Jeriah exhaled sharply. It won't be. You've heard them. They think this is magic or coincidence. They're convinced, if anything, that their gods did this. Anything but the hand of Adonai. Atalia slumped into the chair by the window and pressed her dirt-covered fingers into her temples. What if it gets worse? Jeriah swallowed hard, staring at the ground in front of him. It will. His mind swirled with a mixture of dread and satisfaction. A silence fell between them. They have no idea what's coming, he whispered. If Jeriah was being honest, he was happy to see this suffering befall his Egyptian neighbors, no matter how uncomfortable the days ahead would be for him and his family. When he was a child, his father had often reminded him things would not always be this way. Adonai had a plan to rescue his people out of Egypt and bring them to a land promised to their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. His father also reminded him, again and again, that justice was in the Lord's hands. What a comfort that was for a people who had been so terribly wronged. By the fourth morning, the blood had faded from the riverbanks, but that brought little relief. Jeriah knew there was more coming. He slipped from his sleep sack and rolled onto the cold, dusty floor. With one leg, he shoved his foot not so gently into Ketura's side, right underneath the ribcage. "Ugh," Keturah grunted. 5 more minutes. "You know what they'll do if we're late. Get up," Jeriah commanded his little brother as he pushed himself upright. Keturah groaned and sat up, rubbing his ribs. His hair was a tangle of wild, dark curls, flattened on one side, sticking out in uneven tufts on the other. He glanced at Jeriah. "Why do you have to be so mean? You're just like Dagon." Jeriah didn't respond. He only rolled his eyes and turned away, reaching for his worn tunic. Sometimes the weight of the household felt like a millstone strapped to his back, silent, unseen, but always there. Every cracked clay jar, every skipped meal, every desperate attempt his sister made to barter for their needs, somehow it all looped back to him, the eldest son. It was a title that sounded noble when whispered by neighbors, but it burned heavy in his chest. As if holding everything together was a rope he gripped with bleeding hands, afraid to let go, afraid everything would unravel if he did. "Let's go," he demanded. "I said I'm coming," Keturah whined. Jeriah felt a sting of regret. He knew his brother had suffered so much in the last year. The loss of their father, the harsher working conditions, food and water becoming increasingly scarce. He was only a little boy. Jeriah couldn't remember when his bitterness toward the Egyptians began to spill over into every relationship of his life. The bitterness infected him like a poison, slowly spreading its way into all of life, until it became the only lens through which he saw the world. Keturah squealed. As quickly as the regret surfaced, it vanished as a fresh wave of annoyance surged. Jeriah tugged on Keturah's arm and pulled him out the door. As they slipped outside into the gray light, the air smacked them in the face with the thick, putrid smell of rot. Frog carcasses littered the road, their bellies bloated and splitting open. The boys gagged as they tried to clear a path. The sun hadn't crested the horizon, but the day already felt unbearable. They pulled scarves over their faces and rushed to the fields. They didn't have much time to gather straw for the day's labors, and today would be more difficult as they mined through the goop and rot that peppered the ground covering most of the straw. After 2 hours, well after the time they should have arrived at the brickyard, the boys stumbled to their stations. Keturah's eyes were wide with fear as hot shame turned his face a deep shade of magenta. Jeriah stared at the ground as he made his way through the bustling workers, hoping to go unnoticed. Both boys knew if they were, The consequences would be severe. Jiraiya, Keturah, slower than the rest as always. Dagon. The Egyptian taskmaster's voice rumbled across the brickyard, smug and cruel. He sat high on his horse, whip wrapped securely around the palm of his hand. Jiraiya kept his eyes forward. Dagon's whip cracked in the air, not landing this time, but close enough to make them flinch. Keturah squealed. Stop where you are! You people always move slowly when it's your god causing the trouble. Dagon leaned down, lips curled. I thought your god was supposed to save you. Seems he just makes you stink more. Something inside Jiraiya snapped. He stopped walking. The rope that held his bag of straw slid off his shoulder and tumbled to the ground. His chest rose and fell, fast and shallow. Dagon's smirk faltered just slightly. His eyes drew tight. Pick it up, Hebrew, the taskmaster barked. Jiraiya turned, slow and deliberate, his eyes locked with Dagon's. My god is warning you, he said, voice low and trembling with rage. Are you too foolish to see? You may think this is all chance or coincidence. You're too proud to listen. You'll see. A few workers paused, bricks in hand, watching. Jiraiya turned in defiance and began gathering his scattered straw. Dagon's smile returned, colder than before. Then I suppose we'll both see what your god does next. The whip struck this time, hard across Jiraiya's back. Jiraiya gasped, his eyes stung with fresh tears brimming at the edge, but he refused to show a hint of emotion. He tumbled forward but pushed himself right up again, looking ahead unflinchingly. Another lick came down. The crack of the whip split the air, making a sickening whistle before biting into his flesh. Jiraiya jerked under the blow and fell to the ground. With each lash, Dagon remained the same, grip tight, expression unreadable, each lash falling with a cruel precision across Jiraiya's back. When Dagon finished, his back looked like a web of gnarled branches, twisting and knotted. Blood oozed out of the open wounds. Around him, silence spread. The others watched, wide-eyed and unmoving. Lately, the whippings came without warning and far more frequently than ever before. Hebrew filth! Dagon spat on the ground next to Jiraiya's face. Your god is nothing. Back to work, he thundered. That night, the house was still. Jiraiya lay face down on the mat, tunic peeled away, his back a tangled map of lashes and broken skin. Each breath lit a fresh sting along his spine, but he made no sound. Atalia crouched beside him, wringing out a cloth and dabbing gently at the worst of the wounds. She had said nothing since Keturah and the neighbors stumbled into the house with Jiraiya draped over their shoulders. You're lucky he stopped when he did, she finally whispered. Jiraiya didn't answer. His jaw was clenched so tightly his teeth ached. Atalia dipped the rag again, this time into the bowl where she had mixed crushed herbs with cool water. The scent was bitter. He'll kill you if you keep talking back, she said. One tiny moment caused so much destruction. You know you'll live with these scars for the rest of your days. Jiraiya's breath came sharp through his nose. Let him try. Atalia paused, the cloth hovering in the air. That's not strength, she said softly. That's pride. He turned his face away from her. It's not pride. It's justice. It's fire, and I'm tired of putting it out. Her hand stilled. We're all tired. Jiraiya closed his eyes. Behind them, the image of Dagon's face hovered, calm, controlled, satisfied. Each strike of the whip had been delivered without rage, That made it worse. Dagon didn't need to be angry. He hurt people because he could. Jariah could still feel the pressure in his chest, the rage that hadn't left since that moment in the brickyard. It pulsed in him like a second heartbeat. Not just at Dagon, at all of it. I want him to suffer, he said finally. Atalia halted. Jariah, I want to see the fear in his eyes when everything falls apart. I want to see him come face to face with justice. Silence settled over them again. Not heavy, just sad. Atalia returned to her work, gentler now. You're becoming someone Father wouldn't recognize. Jariah didn't respond. Because she was right. It had been nearly a year ago. Jariah had returned from the brickyard, sunburned and furious. His arms ached from lifting more than his quota. He'd thrown down the sack by the door, and the noise startled his father, who had been sitting by the hearth, hunched beneath a thin blanket. His skin had lost its rich tone, faded to an ashen gray. His hands, once strong and steady, trembled as he reached for a cup of water. There had been no doctors for men like them. No balm, no rest, just slow, quiet wasting. Let me call someone, Jariah had said that night, kneeling beside him. Maybe one of the Egyptians, maybe... No. His father had interrupted gently, placing a hand on Jariah's arm. I don't want their pity, and I don't want you to beg for scraps of their kindness. Then what am I supposed to do? Jariah had snapped, more from fear than anger. His father had just looked at him, soft eyes sharp with quiet fire. Protect your mother, guide your siblings, and remember who you are, who we belong to. We're sons of the promise. Don't let suffering steal that from you. Even then, Jariah hadn't known how to respond. It was the last time his father spoke with that much strength. He'd died 2 weeks later. Now, lying on the mat, Jariah opened his eyes again. The memory burned through him, his father's stillness, his dignity, the way he'd looked suffering in the face and hadn't let it rot his soul. Jariah clenched his teeth. I'm not like him, he muttered into the mat. Atalia paused. No, you're not. But you could be. Her words stung even more than Dagon's whip. Jariah didn't sleep that night. He sat near the low-burning coals of the fire, knees pulled to his chest, breath shallow. The pain across his back had dulled to a throb, but it kept him grounded, a physical reminder of the truth he refused to forget. His eyes flicked across the quiet shapes of his family. Atalia curled near the fire, Keturah breathing in uneven rhythms beside her, his mother's silhouette still as stone in the far corner. They deserved better. His father had deserved better. And yet, for generations, this had been their portion. Brick and whip, sweat and silence. No land, no voice, no dignity. His fists tightened. He could still see the way the Egyptian guards had stood watch as his father wasted away. Not one offered to help. Not one so much as looked at him with pity. And when he died, no one stopped the work. Jariah had been back in the brickyard the next day. That wasn't just cruelty. That was evil. He thought of the woman who had shoved Atalia to the ground for a sip of water, of the stolen childhoods, the lashes, the mocking, the long, slow grinding down of a people. How could he not be angry? How could he not want retribution? You're becoming someone Father wouldn't recognize? Maybe so. But what else could he be? How else could he respond? Patience had gotten them nowhere. Maybe it wasn't patience the world needed now. Maybe it was justice. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Think Forever Storytelling Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you'd leave us a comment here or over on our socials at Go Think Forever. And be sure to join us next week when we'll bring the conclusion of Alyssa Poblete's story, Justice and Mercy.